Hi there. So I'm going to talk you through Heart of Darkness and try to do this all in one shot since your class starts in about 35 minutes. And I only have about 15 minutes of video to get started with. One thing I want you to notice that I'm going to do is really overdo it, because I don't usually do that with texts. And the important skills that you really need to look for in Heart of Darkness. And then each of you have a role, so you're going to find your own things that you're going to be looking for. I'm going to try to point out as many of those as possible. You're going to be looking for repetition, juxtaposition, contrasts. You're going to see a lot of things between light and dark. The sea, obviously, archetypes, all kinds of stuff. All right, so let's get started. The Nelly, a cruising yawl, which is a ship, swung to her anchor without a flutter of sails and was at rest. So let's talk about the flutter of sails. Without a flutter of sails, which means she was almost perfect. And keep in mind that a lot of people read this text as if England was perfect. Everything was perfect with colonialism. So everything is perfect with this ship too. The flood had made, the wind was nearly calm, and being bound down the river, the only thing for it was to come and wait for the turn of the tide, which is a boating term. You have to wait for the tide to turn so that you can actually go into whatever port. The sea reach of the Thames stretched before us like the beginning of an interminable waterway. All right, let's start with this right here. The Thames, which is a river in England, stretched before us like the beginning of an interminable waterway. And if you want one of your good SAT words, interminable means it doesn't end. So the Thames goes on forever. And one of the reasons why the Thames stretches out interminably, because that is the river that people go on in order to go explore. So all of your explorers coming out of England, whether they're going to explore new lands or colonize or destroy, they're all going to float down the Thames. And so why is it interminable? Because it goes to, that's their gateway to the world. And we're just going to keep using the word colonization because that's kind of what this is about. In the offing, the sea and sky were welded together without a joint. And in the luminous space, the tanned sails of the barges drifted up with the tide seemed to stand still in red clusters of canvas sharply peaked with gleams of varnished sprits. A haze rested on the low shores that ran out on the sea in vanishing flatness. The air was dark above Gravesend, and farther back still seemed condensed into the mournful gloom, brooding motionless over the biggest and greatest town on earth. Okay, we're just going to talk about this word brooding for just a second. Brooding has a couple of different terms. On one hand, brooding is kind of this melancholy, overcompassing sadness. But on the other hand, strangely enough, if you have chickens, you understand what brooding is. Brooding means to take things in and to sit on them. So a chicken who's brooding is actually sitting on her eggs. So this broodingness over the biggest and greatest town on earth, and if you can guess what the biggest and greatest town on earth is London. And why is London the biggest and greatest town on earth? And why is London brooding? Is London brooding because it's oppressive in nature and it's overpowering things? Is London brooding because it takes things in and sits on them like a mother hen? Why is London brooding? And every time we talk about the word brooding, it's always in conjunction with something that's dark. So that's why it's hard to read this book as something that's, are we hating colonialism or are we embracing it? And it depends on who's talking at the time. Is it Conrad's opinion, or is it our narrator's opinion? Is it Marlowe's opinion? It's going to change as you go. So just keep in mind with these images of darkness. Let's see. Let's get darkness. Gravesend, which is a city. Mournful gloom. And then we're going to have all of this dark imagery, and then we're going to talk about the director of companies was our captain and our host. So now we have a shift. And we're going to talk about goodness and happiness and good things that are on this ship. So the director of companies was our captain and our host. We four affectionately watched his back as he stood in the bows looking seaward. On the whole river there was nothing that looked half so nautical. He resembled a pilot, which to a seaman is trustworthiness personified. It was difficult to realize his work was not out there in the luminous estuary, but behind him within the brooding gloom. What was it difficult to realize? Why this guy would choose to work in London versus go out to sea, which tells you that these guys on this boat are completely affectionate with the sea and they love the ocean. So if you have such a powerful, trustworthiness person, why would you want to go back there and work on the land? Well, we're going to find that out a little bit later. Between us there was, I have already said somewhere, the bond of the sea. Besides holding our hearts together through the long periods of separation, it has the effect of making us tolerant of each other's yarns. Now, yarns, we've talked about yarn before, but in this case, a yarn is a story, and they're going to use this term a lot when it comes to them telling stories, because when you're on a ship, there's not really much else to do. And even convictions. The lawyer, the best of the old fellows, had, because of his many years and many virtues, the only cushion on deck and was lying on the only rug. The accountant had brought out already a box of dominoes and was toying architecturally with the bones. All right, this is where it starts getting too much. So the lawyer and the accountant, I'm just going to give you an idea. These guys, nobody in this story has a name except for Marlowe and Kurtz. So everybody's just like vague references to occupations. And if you really look at these occupations, these guys are wealthy. That's not how you spell occupations. Occupations? Yeah? No? Good? There we go. But when we get into Marlowe, we only have a lawyer who's sitting on a rug and only an accountant who's playing with dominoes, which are important. What are dominoes made of? Way back in the day, ivory. Now here's your first, not the first reference, but also what do dominoes look like? They're black and white. That's your contrast. So all the way down to dominoes is how specifically Conrad has chosen these words. Yes, we're going overboard a little bit, maybe not. It is correct. In toying architecturally with the bones. Did y'all know that dominoes were called bones? Why are they called bones? Because what is really ivory? It's like part of the bones of an elephant. So bones is an important word. Marlowe sat cross-legged right aft, leaning against the mizzen mast. He had sunken cheeks, a yellow complexion, a straight back, and an aesthetic aspect. If you don't know what aesthetic is, look it up. It means he looks good. And with his arms dropped, the palms of the hands outwards resembled an idol. Okay, think about this. Straight back, arms dropped, straight hands outwards. What does he look like? Anyone? Anyone? Buddha. And one thing about Buddha that you will, if you ever do some research on Buddha, is that he went out, did some traveling, and when Buddha came back, he didn't want to tell people because he didn't think anyone would believe him. In this story at this moment, Marlowe's about to tell a story for the first time, and he doesn't think anyone's going to believe him. So he is very Buddha-like, and that's not the first time you're going to see a reference to that. The director, satisfied the anchor had good hold, made his way aft and sat down among us. We exchanged a few words. lazily. Afterwards, there was a silence on board the yacht. For some reason or another, we did not begin that game of dominoes. We felt meditative and fit for nothing but placid staring. The day was ending in a serenity of still and exquisite brilliance. The water shone pacifically. The sky, without a speck, was a benign immensity of unsustained light, and very mist on the Essex marsh was like a gauzy and radiant fabric hung from the wooden rises inland. The draping of the low shores and the diaphanous folds, only the gloom to the west, brooding over the upper reaches, became more somber every minute, as if angered by the approach of the sun. So guys, this is another example of juxtaposition. Look how beautiful and serene the day was ending. It was serene and brilliance and water shone, and then all of a sudden the gloom came, and things were once again brooding over the upper reaches. And why are we angry that the day is ending? Why is it angered by the approach of the sun? Well, what is the sun? This is a light reference. And, forgive me for going overboard. The light is making the darkness mad. Where would the light be making the darkness mad? Maybe the light being colonization, making the darkness of the jungle mad. Once again, a huge juxtaposition and contrast of emotions and images. So little things like that have a lot of meaning in this and are kind of Conrad's little thoughts of what his opinion is of colonization. Okay, let's see how much time I have. Oh, I still got 3 minutes. Perfect. Okay, and at last, in the curved and imperceptible fall, the sun sank low, and from glowing white changed to a dull red, without rays and without heat, as if about to go out suddenly, stricken to death by the torch of that gloom brooding over a crowd of men. More of that imagery, brooding, anger. I hope you're getting it by now. Forthwith a change came over the waters, and the serenity became less brilliant, more profound. The old river in its broad reach rested unruffled at the decline of the day. After ages of good service done to the race that peopled its banks, spread out on the tranquil dignity of a waterway leading to the uttermost ends of the earth. We looked at the venerable stream, not in the vivid flush of the short day that comes and departs forever, but in the august light of abiding memories. And indeed, nothing is easier for a man who, as the phrase goes, followed the sea with reverence and affection, than to evoke a great spirit of the past upon the lower reaches of the Thames. Why is the sea meant to have reverence and affection? And they're going to go on to talk about how the sea is crowded with memories of men and ships it had borne to the rest. So the sea has to have respect, because the sea can take life and the sea can give life. So now, once again, another thematic link of life versus death. And do we have this respect for the sea that they don't have for other cultures? So is this an odd respect for the sea? Is it a contrast of life and death? Once again, reaching a little bit far, but we'll see. It had known and served all the men whom the nation is proud, from Sir Francis Drake to Sir John Franklin, knights entitled and untitled. Okay, as you read this paragraph, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I want you to Google these guys. These guys were explorers, and guess what they did when they explored? They took. And they took treasures. In fact, one of them went and attacked a Spanish ship, got all the gold, came back, and the second he jumped off and gave all of his pillage to the queen, she knighted him. That's how important it is for England to take over and destroy things. And this last phrase is a great contrast. The dreams of men, the seeds of commonwealths, the germs of empires. And that's why sometimes they think, do we have an opinion that's against colonialism? Is he mocking colonialism? Is he mocking